Welcome back to The Gaze. I am Henry Keane, and this is my show, Talk for More. I'm happy to meet you on a digital platform of a new future Europe space. We find and highlight all of the most significant events in the region for you, and we'll speak about it with the best of experts. Today, we will speak about the NATO summit, of course, Vilnius 2023. And I'm very glad to present today's guest, Anders Aslund, professor at Georgetown University. Mr. Aslund is a Swedish economist and former senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. He is also chairman of the International Advisory Council at the Center of Social and Economic Research. His work focuses on economic transition from centrally planned to market economies. Thank you for finding time for us, Professor.
My pleasure.
How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
Let me talk you through to my first question. Let's begin with an obvious, the expected accession of Sweden. Speaking at the beginning of a two-day NATO summit in Vilnius, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg welcomed President Erdogan's agreement to forward the accession protocol for Sweden and the Grand National Assembly as soon as possible, calling this a historic decision. Moreover, the Secretary General stressed that this summit is already historic before it has started, since Sweden will become a full-fledged member of the alliance. He said, I quote, "It is good for Sweden, good for Turkey, and good for the whole alliance and the Baltic region." I have two questions, actually. First, was there any possibility for Sweden to get access into the alliance already during the Vilnius summit?
Well, basically, I think this was a given, and you could see the reactions of President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken. They knew this would come, and I think that this was very much connected with President Erdogan playing this as hard as possible, partly in order to push Sweden to tighten legislation on Kurds and terrorists in Sweden. Some of it was definitely needed, and partly to make sure that Turkey got F-16 for $20 billion from the US. And the second deal was clearly in the cards already. That's what made the Biden top administration so calm. And Sweden did what it had to do formally on the first point.
Right, so can you talk us through a bit more about this anti-terrorist legislation? What is it about? What happens?
Well, Sweden had very poor legislation in several regards on terrorism, and now it has been tightened up. One was financing of terrorist organizations. The PKK is considered by the European Union a terrorist organization, and Sweden did not have a proper legislation on it. And one person who dealt with PKK financing was extradited to Turkey for that reason. And Sweden has had very lax legislation on terrorists also. You have to make a distinction who is a terrorist and who is a political refugee. But most of the people that Erdogan considered terrorists, the overwhelming majority, were political activists, people like journalists, and none of those people is being extradited to Turkey.
Right. Please explain to me. So Sweden did it quite fast, right? So the Sweden didn't know before they did. You probably in Sweden had a poor legislation in this matter. And then if you want to access the NATO, you have to fix the matter. And then the matter was fixed quite fast, was it?
Yeah, it was done last year, all these legislative changes, but then President Erdogan raised the bar, and something rather silly was the burning of two Qurans in Sweden, one by a Dane, financed by Russians outside of the Turkish embassy, and then later by an Iraqi atheist outside of the mosque the main mosque in Stockholm. And Sweden has very far-reaching freedom of expression legislation, approximately like the United States. And Erdogan complained about this as well. And the biggest deal was probably that Erdogan wanted, I think in the end, 200 Kurdish activists in Sweden to be extradited to Turkey. But apart from two, these people were bona fide political refugees.
Well, I have a very tricky question, actually, from me personally. Erdogan obviously has quite an influence in Sweden right now. Do you think that this influence will be prolonged after Sweden will access NATO, after it will become an ally of in the alliance, and will have all the rights? What happened?
I mean, I wouldn't put it like that. No. Sweden had certain weaknesses in its anti-terrorist legislation, and they have been tightened.
Okay, so the matter has been fixed, and yeah, all right.
Yeah, so I don't think that any matter remains. And the last point that Erdogan brought up, seemingly not seriously, that is that Turkey should be allowed to enter the European Union. And the irony is that Sweden has been the country that has been most in favor of Turkey joining the European Union. But of course, now Turkey violates all kinds of universal norms on freedom of media, freedom of expression, and rule of law. So therefore, EU accession is not on the table, and this is not an issue that Sweden should be approached about.
Right, thank you very much for your detailed answer. My next question, what's next, Professor? Should we expect more countries to enter the alliance? I'm not talking about the Ukraine right now. I'm talking about Balkans, for example, Moldova, and maybe more countries want to join the alliance. Do you think this is the case? Do you think this is the future of alliance, more entry?
Well, if we start with the European Union instead, we have that the Western Balkans is a big issue. And Montenegro and Albania have already, and North Macedonia have already entered NATO, but they are not part of the European Union. Serbia is going in the wrong direction, both in terms of corruption, rule of law, and highly pro-Russian. So Serbia is really out of it for a considerable period, and of course not getting closer to NATO. Moldova is a moot point because Moldova is basically doing the same as Ukraine. It has a very nice government and president now, and a nice parliamentary majority, but it doesn't really have any defense. And it has the problem with Transnistria, which is in effect occupied by Russia. So it's very difficult to touch Moldova, and Moldova is not pushing for it. It's rather maintaining a neutral position because of a strong pro-Russian bloc within the country. So Moldova can't be touched, and Georgia got quite negative hearing at the NATO summit for good reasons, because this is a one-man show of Bidzina Ivanishvili, who in effect runs the country to the benefit of Russia. So Georgia is out for the time being. So what remains? Well, we have two still neutral countries in Europe that are members of the European Union. That is Austria and Ireland. Ireland has effectively no defense. Austria has intelligence service that is completely penetrated by Russia. and is therefore not considered serious in intelligence terms, and it also has an economy that is highly penetrated by Russia. So I think that it was actually quite good for NATO now that Austria was not a member, but Austria will come up later on because some people in Austria think this is not good.
All right, let's leave Austria aside. What about Moldova and Transnistria? Do you think that Transnistria problem, the whole problem of it, is artificially created in Russia? Do you think this is the case?
Of course. Right. But I think that if Ukraine wins, defeats Russia, which is what I hope and believe, then I think that Transnistria will be untenable for Russia. What I hear is that we have only 1,500 troops there, and they are not very well trained or well equipped. So Transnistria cannot persist, I suspect, when Ukraine has won.
Right, thank you very much for your detailed answer, sir. We come into another question. The Asia Pacific contingent, the NATO talks includes Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, Southern Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins. All four nations have expressed views that what has happened in Ukraine simply cannot happen in the Pacific. I read this cannot term as a should not. So since the bare facts of the four Pacific leaders in Vilnius, is it kind of a testament to NATO's interest in the Indo-Pacific and the focus on the challenges that China poses for the alliance? On that point, Stoltenberg looks to be in a lockstep with US President Biden, with the two pledging to strengthen NATO ties to the Pacific when they met at the White House last month. And the leaders of the four Pacific nations also seem to be striving for a united approach. So we can expect new alliances or trilateral security pact between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States called a UK-US to grow bigger. Am I wrong?
It was a question. Well, clearly we are seeing here that Japan is becoming much more militant, or became under the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and that line remains. South Korea, that has had very bad relations with Japan for a long time because of World War II, has now better relations with Japan than at any other time after World War II. And Australia has always been quite combative. You can say that New Zealand is following Australia. So these four countries are very closely ganging up with the United States now to quite another degree than we have seen. And of course, everybody's worried about likely Chinese expansionism. And the focus is now very much on Taiwan. Previously, it was the South Chinese islands. That is no longer the issue. And the big question in this puzzle, geopolitical puzzle, is India. To what extent will India join up with the West? The US is doing everything it can in order to get India on its side. Japan is also working hard. While India is a continent in its own right, and the Indians are very afraid of the Chinese, but Indian politics, I spent quite some time in India. Indian politics is very difficult and it's very self-absorbed, as you would expect from a country with 1.4 billion people. So this is the big question. How will India act?
My next question. Allies agreed to a package of 3 elements bringing Ukraine closer to NATO. This includes a new multi-year assistance program to facilitate the transition of the Ukrainian armed forces from Soviet era to NATO standards and help rebuild Ukraine's security and defense sector, covering critical needs like fuel, demining equipment, and medical supplies. Allies also agreed to establish the new governing body, NATO-Ukraine Council. It has been reaffirmed that Ukraine will become a member of NATO and agree to remove the requirement of a Membership Action Plan, MAP. This is a strong package for Ukraine and a clear path towards its membership in NATO, said Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Allies adopted the most comprehensive defense plan since the end of the Cold War, Mr. Stoltenberg said, designed to counter the alliance's two main threats, Russia and terrorism. The new regional plans provide for 300,000 troops at high readiness, including substantial air and naval combat power. Allies also approved a new defense production action plan to accelerate joint procurement, boost production capacity and enhance allies' interoperability. To meet their defense needs, allies made an enduring commitment to invest a minimum of 2% of their GDP in defense. European allies and Canada recorded an 8.3 real terms increase in their defense budgets in 2023, the largest increase in decades. 11 allies meet or exceed the benchmark this year, and this number is expected to grow substantially in 2024. Regarding this Vilnius summit, Professor, do you think that we're just promised thing and it's enough for Ukraine? We achieved our goal. If we are, say, we are Ukraine, should Zelensky say, it's all right, thank you very much? Or it could be done more? Should Ukraine demand more?
Ukraine demands more, and rightly so. I think that one can summarize the Vilnius summit in 2 points. The communique was very disappointing. Essentially, it did not take Ukraine application for membership of NATO further than we saw in Bucharest in 2008. Nice. It was a commitment that Ukraine will become a member of NATO sometime in future, unclear when, and the conditions for entry were not clarified. And in the end, it said allies must agree. And that means there was no commitment in the communique for Ukraine becoming a member of NATO at any time. So that was the negative point. The positive point is that everybody seems to have been embarrassed by this. And therefore, we are now seeing lots of countries providing more arms than previously was anticipated. So I'm thinking particularly of France and Germany. But also you mentioned the Ukraine-NATO Council. It is important to have an institution that I presume will meet twice a year, as was previously the NATO-Russia Council. And that means that Ukraine will have an institutional engagement with NATO that will be very useful. So I put it in 3 points. The commitment to membership, pretty much zero. Commitment to arm Ukraine, better than expected. And there is a third, an institution that is likely to turn out to be important over time. Looking upon NATO as such, I think that the failing party here is the US. 21 countries wanted to invite the Ukraine as a member of NATO. 10 did not. And the leader there was the United States, followed by Germany. That is always the reluctant part. If the US had taken a different point, we would have seen a completely different communique. And it seems simply that the US delegation appears to have been out of touch with reality.
Appears to be out of touch with reality, or they simply don't want. Okay, what is the other reality they are looking
Well, they thought that they should be thanked and got apparently upset by President Zelensky's very justified complaint about the communique. It sounded as if they hadn't read the NATO communique from Bucharest, as we all have done. And they didn't realize that everybody who's in favor of Ukraine will see has the needle moved forward. No, it hasn't. That's a problem. And this is the reality that they were unaware of. If
unaware, or maybe, pardon me for interrupting, unaware or afraid. I mean, the war is raging right now in Europe. It is what is happening. And this is the reality that obviously cannot be ignored otherwise. I mean, there's no chance. But when you are overseas, you can maybe afford that for the time being. Let's say, let's wait and see what happens. Is that, what are they doing?
I would put it in different terms. I think that it's simply ignorance. The US decisive group is the National Security Council. These people are very young and they have not been much abroad. Most of them are former congressional staffers and not, as has often been the case previously, serious diplomats who have spent many years abroad. So these are spoiled American brats who don't know much about the places that are called abroad. And they don't necessarily read documents that were written 15 years ago.
It's their job. I mean, they're completely out of reality, out of European reality at least. I agree with you totally. They're dwelling in their own American reality, which helps not us at all. The Czech president, going to my next question, Petr Pavel, stated that the window of opportunity for Ukraine military advance would likely close before the end of this year. He added that any progress achieved on the battlefield by the end of 2023 could form the foundation for future negotiations between Kiev and Moscow, which he believes cannot be avoided. Among the main reasons for the alleged closure of this opportunity, the Czech leader cited not only the challenging winter conditions, but also the upcoming elections in Russia and the United States. These circumstances, according to President Pavel, are likely to result in a diminishing readiness among Ukraine's allies to provide substantial military support. Do you agree that is the case? But I mean, do you think that Eastern European countries should help Ukraine even more, or they maybe should pause or even stop helping?
No, obviously, I think that there should be more help for Ukraine, and I think that it will be forthcoming, as I said, in compensation for the NATO members offering Ukraine so little in terms of membership. I have a great confidence in the Ukrainian military and the military leadership. Of course, I'm no military expert. My area is economics and foreign policy. But as I see it, now we are seeing that General Zaluzhny is checking where are the Russians strong, where are they weak, and then bombing the depots of ammunition and diesel and people. And I presume that sooner or later we will see a serious Ukrainian attempt at a breakthrough, which we have not seen as yet. And I think that it will come in the third quarter of this year, when we can't know, but as the coup attempt in Russia shows, the Putin regime is now extremely weak and it's extremely divided. This is what you would expect from a regime that fails.
Thank you. I will take this as a very good answer. Thank you very much, Professor. But regarding this window of opportunity by Petr Pavel, President of Czech Republic, what is it all about? I can't see any window of opportunity to be open and even closed. I'm not a professional. I'm not an expert in military things. Maybe Petr Pavel is. What do you think that the window of opportunity will close when he assumes it will close? And
No, I don't think so. Essentially, we have two parties here. The Ukrainians know that if we don't take back essentially all our territory, in particular Crimea and Sevastopol, then the existence of a nation is uncertain at best. And Putin does not accept Ukraine as an existing entity. So this is really about the existence of Ukraine, so therefore there's nothing to negotiate. Either Ukraine exists or it doesn't.
Right. Thank you. Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, believes that Ukraine may receive its first F-16 fighter jet by the end of March 2024. But the deadline may be shifted. In an interview with Radio Liberty, a journalist asked to give an estimate of when training would begin and when Ukraine could expect to receive the US-made F-16 fighter jets. Kuleba said that it is a very complicated technical issue. Training should begin in August, possibly in early September. In parallel, we will be preparing the legal decisions necessary for the transfer of the aircraft and the aircraft themselves. Kuleba thinks if by the end of the first quarter of the next year, the first F-16s are flying in Ukrainian air, piloted by Ukrainian pilots, then it will be one schedule. But Ukraine also needs to train engineers like technicians and prepare the infrastructure. There are a lot of peculiarities, so the schedule could be shifted. He has added that the United States is making decisions on providing Kyiv with some other types of weapons, and these are also very difficult decisions, but, I quote, "a meaning US are making them nevertheless." My question is, does all this Western weaponry really pose a threat to Russia, to Russia's sovereignty, you think, when in Ukrainian hands?
Of course not. I mean, this is all nonsense. We have heard from the National Security Council here a lot of nonsensical arguments. The first is we must not provoke Mr. Putin. And bizarre ideas that we must not cross his red lines because then he will use nukes. And this is self-imposed by the White House, which makes no sense. And the war is particular by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. We must not provoke a third world war. I mean, take a break. This is not a risk. And what we saw at this NATO summit was that only the US and Germany thought like that. So the National Security Council here really needs to grow up.
Well, National Security Councils, I mean, UN Security Council was recently presided by a country terrorist, led by an international thug at large. This is some structures in Europe really should be changed according to the reality. Because, as for me, it very much looks like Russia is still presiding over the UN Security Council, and NATO decisions are made with a certain touch of fearing Russia. Or you think that this is just an ignorance of, young politicians, or there is fear?
I think that it's ignorance. They don't understand that Russia cannot use nuclear arms. And it's very striking that Ukrainians, Poles, Balts are not afraid of Russia using nuclear arms because everybody understands if Putin would use nukes, he would be dead. And that's not a comfortable situation to be in.
You mean to be dead? Yeah, certainly not. Ukraine can also expect more stringent controls to be put in place by US authorities to protect its weapons technology. This is spelled out in the State Department document. US plan to counter illicit diversion of certain advanced conventional weapons in Eastern Europe, which was published in October. The plan addresses the need to protect the weapons themselves and the technology contained in them. It outlines the need to securely store and account for weapons in Ukraine in neighboring countries, to introduce strong regional border management and security to observe and stop illicit transfers, help build capacity in Ukraine's security forces, law enforcement and border control agencies to deter, detect and interdict illicit arms trafficking. Ukraine must adopt all elements of the US plan. It has aspirations to join the EU and NATO finally, and has been given strong indications that this ambition will be supported in due course achieved. So the US plan to counter illicit diversion of certain advanced conventional weapons in Eastern Europe was announced in October. Does it work at all?
Well, first of all, I think that all this is complete nonsense. And this nonsense comes from two different sources. One is the recent, or three different sources. One is the recent US experience of war has been in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there's no reason to draw any parallels with them, but that's what a lot of the people in the Washington establishment who don't know anything about abroad is doing. So they think Ukraine is just another Afghanistan or Iraq. The second point is the Trump people who are in favor of Putin and Russia and against Ukraine and democracy. And they try simply to invent as many problems as possible. And the third problem is the non-governmental organizations, anti-corruption organizations that are also drawing from the Afghan and Iraqi experiences. And they want to have a special inspector general. So this is basically US domestic politics. It has nothing to do with Ukraine.
Does Ukraine stand a chance against that? How can the authorities and Ukrainian people maybe to fight this ignorance, to fight this Trump people, to fight Russian propaganda that intervenes into domestic affairs of United States and Europe? What is your advice?
Well, it's actually quite easy. You do these formal things as long as they don't become too bureaucratic, and you make sure that no scandals happen. So as long as no scandals happen, these things will not be too arduous.
Thank you very much, Professor. The United States Agency for International Development engaged an independent organization to oversee the use of US funds to support Ukraine. USAID organization provides direct budget support through the World Bank mechanism, which is the most efficient way to quickly deliver urgently needed funds with a high degree of accountability. Funds are transferred to the government of Ukraine on a reimbursed basis. This mechanism provides a multi-level system of accountability, said Erin Elizabeth McKee, Assistant Director of the United States Agency for International Development in the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs. To supervise the spending of money, an interdepartmental working group was created, which consists of the offices of the three inspectors general from the Ministry of Defense, from the State Department, and from USAID itself. All the inspectors general of supervisory American government organizations are also involved in the supervision of the U.S. financial assistance to Ukraine. The interagency working group on an oversight in Ukraine also includes 17 intelligence organizations. Professor, my question is, 17 intelligent organizations, well, I wonder how much that costs. Could it be that the problem of Ukrainian corruption is a bit over-exaggerated?
Yeah, but the US has 17 intelligence organizations. This is not a big cost. What has happened is that all of the US support to the government budget goes through a World Bank trust fund, as you sort of mentioned. And this functions perfectly well. So there's one bunch of money that is going to education, one to healthcare, one to government salaries, and one to pensions, and so forth. So this functions very well, and there have been no concerns about it. But the funny thing is that the US cannot itself disperse the money to the Ukrainian Ministry of Finance. It has to go through the World Bank Trust Fund in order to make sure that there can be no complaints about transparency and proper procedures.
All right, thank you very much. It is pretty obvious to me that all that negative vibe about ammunition and corruption in Ukraine comes from Russia, Russian or pro-Russian media as a propaganda. I just love that one. Birds of feather come together. I mean, look who's talking about corruption. The Kremlin. For real? What if I say that Western media should somehow oppose Russian propaganda? Would you agree on that? And how can we do it?
Yeah, well, the big problem here is Trump. Trump is pursuing all this talk about Ukrainian corruption. He thinks, has said so many times that he thinks that Putin is great. Now he wisely doesn't say it very often, but this is clearly his view. And his most loyal Congress people like this low intelligence Marjorie Taylor Greene is opposing all aid, and Matt Gaetz, they are opposing all aid to Ukraine, and they are using this argument without any basis at all.
Thank you very much for your detailed answers. Thank you very much for your time. We hope to have you back very soon with more questions and answers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure.
It was Anders Aslund, professor at Georgetown University. Mr. Aslund is a Swedish economist and a former senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. He was with us. Thank you. I am glad to present my next guest. He is Borys Drozhak, entrepreneur, principal engineer, inventor, and a marvelous person. Are you a good person, Boris? Do you consider yourself a good person?
Oh, it's a moral question. Definitely towards the good.
All right. We just talked about the Russian disinformation and fakes and propaganda that Kremlin is spreading all over the world about Ukraine and the West, and you tell me about it. You know, you are fighting the Russian psyops, the psychological operations. In particular, one of the last ones was about the alleged destruction of Euroband, for example. Please talk us through the whole thing in more detail. How do you do it?
Okay. So we actually didn't intend to, fully disarm Russian cybersecurity folks, because we knew that they will do nothing and that it's IPO. That's it. It's just informational operation. We were 100% sure that everything is going to be fine, because no hacker will ever say upfront that they're going to, hack something.
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously. And obviously no one would say that they hacked, because if they hacked the system, they have everything, and it's just smart to have this backdoor and steal money all the time, right? Otherwise, it's like, it's very stupid. So the only thing, the difference that I have a blog, and people who interested in tech and some of high-level discussions about IPO, they of course want to listen the story from people who understand what's going on. And of course, if you just show off what Russians are going to do and show the pathos they present on TV, that will work well to disarm them right away. Because once you show people who are trying to go on a pathos and say that they're going to or kill someone, or threat someone, or steal something, that's very easy for Ukrainians to understand. Oh, okay, they're again talking about something but never do. So to disarm it, it's very easy. You just show it with the right person on the screen, and they will understand. Okay, if Boris is talking about it, most probably they are not hackers. It's just fun.
So this is how you disarm it. This is the tool of disarmament. You make it public. Is that the way?
Yeah, you make it public with other person, right. To be honest, who has at least some reputation, and it works very well. Usually.
So it's a reputational clash, is it?
Yeah. Whoever will be seen
sure.
Anonymous Sudan with people who really understand how system works and can say something generally almost impossible.
All right. Well, Teams of researchers from 14 countries monitored the information space of Eastern Europe countries from June to October 2022. In total, over 5 months of monitoring, analysts recorded 6,727 disinformation messages. The most disinformation was in social networks, so of course, 56.2 of the total number of messages, the least in the content of radio programs, news, as well as in the media content that reflects one's own opinion, comments by expert columnists, etc., etc. The largest number of messages spreading narratives and messages of Russian propaganda that was recorded in Ukraine, almost 20% of the total number. The fewest such messages were found in Romania. The majority of disinformation related to the events of the Russian-Ukrainian war, 55%. Most of the disinformation related to the economic consequences of sanctions, 17.7%. Military aid to Ukraine, 9.3%. Somewhat less misinformation was spread about Ukrainian refugees, 4.9%, almost 5%. The smallest number of disinformation messages has been produced in regards with Russian-speaking minorities and Russian culture issue, about 4% of the total number. So, Boris, educate me. How can I, as an average person, tell a fake from not a fake if I'm not deeply in the matter, or maybe not in the matter at all? Are there any ways and options to fight it?
I probably have some quite bad news in these terms, because whatever, it's not only about the government propaganda, right? It's even like people who just influencers. If you see people often, you like them more. If you see these problems of body, like perfect body on Instagram. If you see often the perfect body, everyone will be obsessed and need to do the same. So we kind of as humans have bugs, and we just need to, I would say, just accept it and understand that everyone is going to use it, not just Russians, everyone.
Yeah, sure.
The more often you see news, the more you will be believing them. Not because you're smart, not because you stupid, educated, irrelevant to all of it. It doesn't matter. You will.
Really?
It's just eventually you're gonna.
So I cannot be educated. Say, if I have two diplomas and I consider myself a very clever and educated man, would I get on the hook anyway? It doesn't matter.
It's not what I see in world. I have a lot of smart people around me.
Sure.
Even very smart, even billionaires in some terms. I see that they are easy to affect by this until someone proves them. So for us, our brain works in a way where we just, it's easier to assume some information and go forward until it's problematic for us, right? We didn't fight the Russian propaganda before until it's a war, right? Not that much people been involved. Right now, it's oh my God, we need to understand each of this component and fight it. And what I would say, it's kind of like fire against fire. If you wanna even win some product competition, your share voice in market should be bigger. That's first of all. You, of course, need to go disapprove and fight fakes and ensure your reputation is okay, ensure no communities fight with each other because of some Russian operation. But eventually you also need a very good propaganda machine. You need a very good IPO specialists who are making these operations.
Can I ask a question in the middle? So are you telling me that there is a part of being good and bad propaganda? Propaganda is the case, right? So to fight propaganda, you have to have available bigger propaganda in quantitative measures. I mean, you have to just your voice be bigger than this voice, and that's it. Is that the tool to fight it?
That's key, but it's not it. Of course, no, because you eventually need to be right? You sooner or later, some people find if you're on the wrong side, it's much easier to disapprove you, to lessen your reputation, to find more people who will not believe you. Just because it's easier to find right words if your enemy or competitor is using it. But even if it's good to good, people anyway can find good words to disapprove someone's reputation. Even if Ukraine is right and everything is doing it the best it possibly can in the circumstance we have, someone can find good words to say, oh my God, they need more weapons, they kind of bad because they are looking for conflict. It's very easy with our language and our base language, right, to find words of disapproving someone's reputation. It's very easy. So it's eternal fight to win it easy way just by educating people. It's just a little part of the war, to be honest.
Okay. Let us talk
I can say one example if you don't mind.
Please, I don't mind. Please do.
We can make almost everyone as a soldier in this case. Like they should be ones who make at least once IPO themselves, disinformation operations. In this case, they understand the mechanism. Once people understand the mechanism, they can understand when they've been influenced by someone else.
Right. Well, here we go.
Otherwise,
we have to make everyone a soldier, to like educated critical thinking, to understand what is going on, and then just filter it through. Maybe this is the way.
Yeah, it's kind of
in schools.
Yeah,
for example.
Or
yeah, well, maybe. Yeah,
imagine the society.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of society, yeah, in school it would be nice, because we have a lot of things that we don't understand how they really work. We have the results, but we don't know what's going on inside the machine and inside the process. So maybe we have to go deeper in that. But let us talk about some conspiracy theories here. UVB-76, or more famous as a buzzer, is a shortwave radio station that broadcasts on the frequency 4,625 kilohertz. It broadcasts a short, monotonous buzz tone, repeating at a rate of approximately 25 tones per minute, 24 hours per day. Sometimes the buzzer signal is interrupted and a voice transmission in Russian language takes place. There is no shortage of theories to explain what the buzzer might be for, ranging from keeping in touch with submarines to communicating with aliens. One such idea is that it's acting as a dead hand signal. I mean, the event Russia is hit by a nuclear attack, the drone will stop the transmission and automatically trigger a retaliation. No questions asked, just a total nuclear obliteration on both sides, a very Russian way. The system was originally pioneered in the Soviet era, where it took the form of a computer system which scanned the airways for signs of life or nuclear fallout. Alarmingly, many experts believe it may still be in use. As Russian President Vladimir Putin pointed out himself, nobody would survive a nuclear war between Russia and the United States. Could the buzzer be exactly that, a dead hand, or is it just another psyops? What do you think? What's going on with this buzzer case? Your personal opinion.
I first time hear it, to be honest.
Really?
I heard about the story in the past, but that it's still a conspiracy. To be honest, I would say there are different approaches you can do with conspiracy overall. First of all, anything people say might be to the point true, because there is no walk without a fire, right? Another approach you can do is say, okay, the conspiracy theory is just another way for these bad guys to make you think in a certain way, right? You can use conspiracy theory exactly for manipulation, exactly for making a mass to think in a certain way.
A religion.
And in this case, in this case, it's easy. Imagine for whom it works and what emotion it makes inside you. If it's frightened, if it's nuclear war, then for me, if I would be Russian, it's easy to use this narrative to just spread another threatening. And it's one of the IPO, it's one of the operations. If you getting down the morality and making people to give up. So I would say, first of all, even if it's a case, even if it's a true, let's think practically what this makes for us and in this war. But in this war, it's not it's not working for us. It
Oh,
works
come on,
against
Boris,
us.
come on. It makes a great story, isn't it? I mean, a dead hand on the radio and a message in the Russian language, and a dead hand pushes the button and everyone dies. Jesus Christ, it's a Hollywood movie script.
Yeah, we had similar situations in the past, right? It was like this submarine oil Caribbean crisis. They had, but when US discovered a submarine near Cuba, and then these people in submarine didn't know if it's a war started and nuclear exchange happened, or there's just, like maybe someone is asking them to pop up. And at the time, there's like a protocol between officers where they should decide, should they launch a nuclear? And because they don't have access to Russian radio, they need to decide it between them. It was 3 officers, and only one of them say, no, let's not launch the nuclear. So like we had in the past story like this, where something bad can happen.
Okay. I mean,
like,
this is the answer. This is the answer. So you have to consider what's at stake, right? So what's at stake? What it actually gives us. If this is an interesting story, like to tell my kids in the evening, like a strange hand that is about to kill us all after the nuclear war starts. We have another expert with us tonight. It is actually not a human person. Time for Deus Ex Machina. ChatGPT answers our question. So we asked ChatGPT today how to neutralize the psyops, the psychological operations. And the answer is, neutralizing psychological operations, psyops, can be complex and multifaceted task as it involves countering the influence of psychological tactics and manipulation. Here are some general strategies that can help in mitigating the impact of psyops. First, awareness and education. One of the most effective ways to neutralize psyops is to ensure that individuals are educated and aware of the tactics and techniques employed. By understanding how psychological operations work, people can become more resistant to their influence. This is exactly what you told me. That you have to break the nutshell and to make people see what's going on in there. And then they're at least a little bit more aware of what they're looking at. Maybe at some point, some more critical thinking will rise in their mind. Maybe this is the you probably agree to that because you said that is the case.
At some point, yeah, but I'm more pessimistic because people, until they made something themselves, they will not understand the techniques. And if they don't understand techniques fully, it's much easier to be influenced. Even if I know all the techniques, right, I will be influenced, but people not. So we're in a bad situation, and we need more like the propaganda machine and making similar attacks and better attacks.
Let me go to another point, which is a critical thinking. Oh, this is my beloved one. Encourage critical thinking skills and promote a skeptical mindset. Teach people to question information sources, analyze evidence, and consider multiple perspectives before forming conclusions. These can help individuals to identify potential manipulative tactics and resist their influence. I mean, ChatGPT is a good person at 100%. It is a machine. How to do it is the hardest thing. How to teach skeptical thinking.
So there is bad news and good news.
Really? Give me the
bad news that in operations, people use critical mindset to question truth. So even if you're very smart, your smartness can be used to manipulate you. Which is kind of like scary a bit. From other perspective, you of course can do the same against. Yeah, you can like do whatever. Yeah. And the good thing that technically machine is, it's kind of like for us a way to build this good person. Because it's a system with lots of rules, and if we, with government, with other people and experts, we technically can build this, like layer by layer, less biases,
Right.
stuff. It's very hard, to be honest. Considering I'm in data science, I know that it's very not easy. Most of our information around has some bias or misinformation, not intended even.
Right.
There's so huge challenge. Though at least we have a bit smarter person than we are. So some of it we might go with a better critical thinking by the computer.
So we are smarter. We have at least somewhat better chance of survival. Thank you. Number 3, source verification. Emphasize the importance of verifying the credibility and reliability of information sources. Encourage individuals to fact-check information before accepting it as true or sharing it with others. Promote the use of reputable sources and encourage skepticism towards unverified or suspicious information. Oh my God, ChatGPT just gave us the tool how to treat religion. Maybe it's an atheist being Deus ex machina. Well, going back to a serious tone, it's a good advice. But again, do you know how to do it? I mean, maybe in school, maybe when we are like little children, we have to be taught to a new environment. Because the environment, this informational ocean, is a constantly changing environment. And the first thing you have to do, you have to be skeptical about everything. Take it step by step, spoon by spoon, verify the sources, blah, 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 and so on, whatever ChatGPT says. Maybe this is the answer.
Oh, a complex question, of course. Of course, we have some, right? We have ideologies, which works without like anyone. They already could be like some Marxism, for example. The Inventor dead for a while, but it's still there and like people supporting it. We have governments with lots of tools,
right,
ways to influence people's mind. We have different policies, laws. There's lots of things helping our society to hold everything together. But interestingly, I would take TikTok as an interesting example, how easy to escape all of it. Like you can, we have, imagine like we have source confirmation or only like right information on TV, like not even democratic, but I would say like authoritarian kind of TV with a good very person, even like this. And then there is a new media like TikTok. People will go there right away because it's some fresh air, some other way of thinking. Even if we have all good, people will in to see something else.
Yeah, I mean, but this is
TikTok, it's not
nothing
regulated.
New, Boris. Excuse me for interrupting. This is nothing new. It always was the case for humanity. It's an interesting new toy. Why not to be involved?
Yeah, and interestingly, that it's always going to be new toy which is not regulated.
Absolutely.
And even if it's authoritarian regime, which is a good thing, right? From our perspective, we can escape utopia. From other, we will never achieve ideal state where we know only truth.
Yeah.
So we can live in this balance.
Let me go to points number 4 and 5. Media literacy. Improve media literacy skills to help individuals recognize media bias, propaganda, and manipulation techniques. Teach people to analyze messages, identify logical fallacies, and understand how narratives are constructed. These can empower individuals to make more informed decisions and resist manipulation. And number 5, emotional resilience. Encourage emotional resilience and psychological well-being. Psychological operations often aim to exploit emotions and induce fear, anger, or other strong reactions. By developing emotional resilience, individuals can better manage their emotions and think more rationally, reducing susceptibility to manipulation.
That's very good 2 points.
Yeah, 2 points, good answers. Another question, and the same question, is how? But
I would say, I have actually interesting answer here.
Yes, please.
Might be very
useful.
The English for that. Just a moment, I forgot.
Useful.
Creative.
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 Right, go ahead.
Yeah. So I would say most of us have families or friends, and if you will be able to understand emotional damages, fallacies in text, and stuff like this, you're gonna have much better family. If you and your beloved ones have more communication about feelings, about the way they perceive words you say,
right,
you guys will learn the same information, you will be better in understanding manipulation around the world with better family as outcome.
What a beautiful answer, Boris. Look, very creative and very professional, just by the way. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your expertise and for what you do. It was Borys Drozhak, entrepreneur, principal engineer, inventor, and actually a very good person. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time again. And no matter how I don't want it, for now, I must say goodbye to you. I'm Enrique, and it was my show, Talk for More. If you liked the episode, press like button. If you didn't like it, let us know why in the comments below. And don't forget to ring the bell, sign, be the first to see the most up-to-date information. Subscribe to the Gaze platform on YouTube and our social networks. Keep in touch. See you soon.